Hello, I am author Eileen Schnabel, author of the Kep Westgard Time Travel to the American Revolution series, and today we are going to do two questions about famous women in the Revolutionary War. So, number one, women were not permitted to join the Continental Army, true or false? And you might not be surprised to learn that is true. They weren't allowed, but it made me curious. When were women allowed? So let's see how you do. Quick question: when was the legislation passed that allowed women to be officially part of the army, of the military forces? And that was actually 1948 under Truman, which I thought was interesting because I had just been to his little White House down in Key West, Florida. So prior to that, tens of thousands of women took part in armies and were nurses, they were spies, they were soldiers. A few tiny. Deborah Sampson was the famous example from the Revolutionary War who pretended to be a man, so she was allowed into the army. But women were a big part of every battle in the United States. But as far as being officially part of the armed services, 1948 under Truman. And then I was curious, it was 1970 that they were allowed to attend military academies. Although in the back of my mind, I'm thinking there was a famous case, I think it was the Citadel, and I'm thinking that was the 80s. I remember it was a big deal. So maybe only certain military academies could women join. And then in the 80s, they were allowed to fly combat missions as pilots. And interestingly, it was actually only as recently as the Obama administration that all combat, including ground combat, positions were open to women. So there's a little bit of a timeline of women in the armed forces. All right, and number two, what nickname was given to soldiers who brought water to wounded soldiers? And that would be, if you see that, a brainiac question if you know that. And that was called Molly Pitcher. That was the nickname. And where that came from is there was a woman named Molly Ludwig Hayes, who during the Revolutionary War, the story goes, she was bringing water to soldiers. And frankly, that was happening. So I think women weren't given credit for how much they were part of these battles and how much courage it would take. Whether you're hauling water out or shooting the gun, you're in the middle of a battle. But anyway, she was bringing water to the soldiers who were manning cannons. And the story goes her husband was shot and wounded, and that she took over manning his cannon. That's what the story goes. But either way, I think even bringing water out there is enormously courageous. So then subsequently, women who brought water to soldiers in these situations were nicknamed Molly Pitcher. Thanks for being here with me today. I hope you have just a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow.